many types of hazards that we're looking at out there are things like viral, bacterial, parasites, bloodborne, waterborne, airborne pathogens, and a lot of different environmental issues as well. We'll take a look at some of these items in these categories. But first, as we go through this, I want you to consider some of the situations you may be in as you're working in the plumbing, heating, cooling trade and in our industry, some of the scenarios that you could get in that could cause these types of hazards, health hazards to you. Things like cutting of DWV or water lines that maybe you don't know exactly what's in those, resetting of fixtures, working in healthcare settings, schools, food processing plants, wastewater treatment plants, for example. And as plumbers, we oftentimes have a bad habit of wiping our hands on our pants or our shirts, or you inadvertently touch your face or your nose during the course of the day, or your eyes. And these are all ways that different things can get into your system. Here are some of the things that you could contract, and we'll discuss those items. Gastroenteritis, or infectious diarrhea, is caused by viruses such as rotavirus in children and norovirus in adults. Although it is not really influenza, it's often referred to as stomach flu. It can be spread by contact with someone who has it, contaminated food and water, or unwashed hands after going to the bathroom, or working on products that have that same contaminant that a bathroom would have. Although it is less common, it can be caused by parasites and bacteria. Bacteria such as E. coli and Salmonella can cause stomach flu. There are other bacterial causes as well. Ingestion of contaminated water or wastewater causes this illness. Protecting yourself from contact with wastewater and contaminated surfaces and proper hand washing are your best defense. Avoid splashing of wastewater. Giardia is a type of anaerobic parasite that lives inside the intestines of infected humans or animals. You can become infected through ingesting or coming into contact with contaminated food, soil, or water. Surfaces or items that have been contaminated by the feces of an infected person or animal are potential hazards. Consider this as you are performing tasks such as changing a toilet seat or resetting a water closet, for example. Symptoms may include violent diarrhea, excess gas, cramps, and nausea. It may begin to appear 2 days after infection. It can range from slight to severe. You may not experience the infection yourself, but you can be a carrier and transmit it to others. Cryptosporidium is another parasite that can infect humans and animals. Crypto also causes diarrheal disease and can survive outside the body for long periods of time. This makes it very tolerant to chlorine disinfection. Although it can be spread in several ways, water is the most common method of transmission. This includes both drinking water and recreational water. It is one of the most frequent causes of waterborne disease in humans in the U.S. It is also contracted by contact with fecal matter, human or animal. Crypto can be life-threatening to a person with a compromised immune system. Certain water filters, reverse osmosis for one example, are capable of removing cryptosporidium. Anyone changing filter cartridges or working on these type of filters should wear gloves and also thoroughly wash their hands afterwards. A bacterium known as Legionella is a cause of Legionnaire's disease, which is a severe form of pneumonia. It is not contracted from person-to-person contact, but by inhalation of water droplets. It usually develops from 2 to 10 days after exposure and often begins with headache, chills, muscle pain, and fever. After 2 or 3 days, other symptoms develop such as cough, shortness of breath, chest pain, confusion, and gastrointestinal issues. Keeping hot water at the proper temperature is a major issue. Warm, stagnant water is ideal for Legionella growth. It thrives at 90 to 105 degrees and can multiply anywhere from 68 degrees to 122. Water mist from cooling towers, swamp coolers, misters, showers, faucets, spas, fountains, and pools are some examples of where Legionella exposure can occur. Disinfection of water systems, pools, spas, and fountains helps prevent Legionnaires. In 2012 in Chicago, there was an incident at a downtown hotel. Guests passing by a decorative fountain in the lobby inhaled the aerosolized water droplets from the fountain. 8 people were afflicted and 3 died from this incident. Protect yourself when working with water systems that have been dormant, water that is kept at the growth range, cooling towers, and other potential growth areas. Hepatitis A is an inflammation of the liver caused by the Hep A virus, which is found in the fecal matter of infected people. It is most commonly transmitted in contaminated drinking water and food. Those at highest risk of Hep A are those living with or having sex with an infected person, travelers in other countries, drug use, children, and employees in child care settings. Rarely is Hep A fatal and usually doesn't cause any long-term problems or complications. The liver generally heals itself over a few weeks to a month. There are no treatments to cure Hep A, but a vaccine is available for prevention. Again, the use of gloves and good hand washing habits are essential when you are working in situations that may present this hazard. Hepatitis B. Most adults who get it recover in a short period of time. Sometimes it will cause a long-term infection and can cause permanent liver damage. Babies and young children are more likely to experience the long-term scenario and damage. Many people have Hep B and aren't aware of it, but as long as they have it, they can spread it to others. It is spread through contact with the blood and bodily fluids of an infected person. Methods of transmission include unprotected sex, sharing needles, getting a tattoo or piercings with tools that aren't properly sterilized, and sharing personal items like razors and toothbrushes. Consider some of the places you may be working. Could there be blood or bodily fluids on the fixture or material you're working with? There is a combination vaccine that will help prevent both hepatitis A and B, and you may want to consider getting it. Hepatitis C, like A and B, affects the liver. If left untreated, it can turn into permanent liver disease. About 17,000 Americans become infected with Hep C each year. More than 15,000 Americans, mostly baby boomers, die each year from hepatitis C-related illnesses such as liver cancer and cirrhosis. Deaths have been increasingly steady for the last decade and are predicted to grow significantly in coming years. Many people are unaware that they have it until some damage is done. Most people who are infected with the virus go on to develop long-term or chronic hepatitis C. It is spread by contact with an infected person's blood in some of the same ways you get hepatitis B. Beware of sharps that may be left in restrooms, and also take precautions when helping injured coworkers. It is not uncommon for people to have hepatitis C for 15 years or more before it is diagnosed. There are tests to see if you have it and medical treatments, but no vaccine to prevent it. There are some other issues here, too, that we need to address. Staph infections are caused by a bacteria commonly found on the skin or in the nose. Most of the time, these bacteria cause only minor skin irritations or no problem at all, but they can turn deadly if the bacteria gets further into your body, like into your bloodstream, joints, bones, lungs, or heart. Treatment is usually done with antibiotics, but some infections no longer respond to that treatment. We have things now called the superbugs. MRSA is one example of those. Many people carry staph bacteria but never have an infection. The bacteria can be transmitted person to person. These are hardy enough to live on things like towels, linens, rags, and other objects long enough to transfer to the next person touching them. The bacteria can enter through cuts, burns, or abrasions on your skin. Be sure to keep all wounds and openings in the skin properly bandaged and protected. Again, proper hand washing is extremely important. Also, make sure that clothing, towels, and rags are washed in hot water and with bleach whenever possible. You don't want to transfer this bacteria to your family or others. And be extremely careful when working in healthcare facilities and schools. Cholera is another diarrheal illness that is caused by water or food contaminated by fecal matter. Children are more susceptible and have the highest rate of infection. This is not all that common in this country, but be extra careful when working in airports, hotels, and other places that foreign travelers frequent. Again, practice good hygiene. C. diff is another one of the diarrheal infections and things that we're seeing more cases of all the time, and this can range from mild to life-threatening. Occasionally it causes problems in healthy people, but most often it is seen in hospitals and long-term care facilities. Protect yourself if you are working in these type of facilities, and especially if you are taking antibiotics for any reason. Antibiotic use increases the chances of getting C. diff. C. diff is a growing problem and is killing over 14,000 people a year in this country alone. Hand washing will help control or eliminate the transmission of the spores. Alcohol-based hand gels do not work on C. diff. If you must work in a C. diff patient's room, make sure you are wearing the proper protective equipment such as a gown, gloves, shoe covers, and anything else the facility may require or suggest. I do have two personal scenarios and experiences with C. diff. One was my mother contracted it in a nursing home and eventually died from it, so I'm very familiar with suiting up to go into the room and the different scenarios there and how easily it is transmitted. In another situation that I had just this winter, I have a friend that recently died of cancer. And she, while in the hospital for treatments and so forth, contracted C. diff. She did not know that. They sent her home for a period of time, and while she was at home and still battling all this diarrhea that they hadn't decided was C. diff yet, but was eventually diagnosed as such, her sewer quit working, and everything in the house backed up. I was called. I recommended who they should call out there. They brought a sewer company in that came in and rotted the sewer out from inside the house. Had other problems there. It turned out it was in the main sewer line. But my point of bringing that up is here is a plumber. You're not working in a healthcare situation where you would think this. You're not in a hospital or nursing home, but an individual's home that you were called to, and you have no idea that this person has this illness, and now you're working directly with the sewage containing the fecal matter that's carrying the C. diff. So just because you're not in situations where you typically find these things, you need to protect yourself because you never know what and who has what and where you're going to find it. Another thing is HIV. HIV weakens your immune system, and once you have it for life. Over time, HIV can lead to AIDS, which is the final stage of HIV infection. Proper treatment can keep HIV in control. It is transmitted by blood and bodily fluids through contact with the mucous membrane or damaged tissue or direct injection with a needle or a syringe. About 50,000 new HIV infections occur in the U.S. each year. Job site protection includes being careful not to come in contact with sharps, properly protecting wounds, and avoiding blood from others. HIV is not spread by water, insects, drinking fountains, or toilet seats. It does not live long outside of the human body. Leptospirosis is a bacterial disease affecting humans and animals. Without treatment, it can lead to kidney damage, meningitis, liver failure, respiratory issues, and possibly death. It is spread by the urine of infected animals, which can make its way into water and into the soil. Lepto can survive for months. It enters the body through the eyes, nose, or mouth, and can also enter the body through cuts and abrasions. Ingestion of the contaminated water can also cause infections. Be especially careful if you are working in a flood situation. It is also a common hazard for sewer workers. Make sure you use boots or waders, gloves, and other appropriate gear when you're in those situations. Now let's look at some other possible exposures. As green plumbing and mechanical systems become more the norm, we need to consider what hazards might present themselves with the reuse of water. Some areas will be using water in the form of rainwater, gray water, reclaimed recycled water, and even black water. Make sure you're educated on these systems, how they work, and their potential hazards. Sewer gas. Exposure to sewer gas is another potential health hazard. It forms when solid waste from humans and animals decompose. It smells like rotten eggs or burning chemicals. At high levels, it destroys the sense of smell, so victims may no longer smell it. Sewer gas contains ammonia, methane, and hydrogen sulfide, all of which are toxic when inhaled in high concentrations. Most common effects are eye irritation, nausea, and trouble breathing. At higher concentrations, people can start experiencing headaches, increased heart rate, lack of muscle coordination, memory loss, and irritability. Low levels can make you sick. High levels can kill you. Avoid working in areas with high concentrations of sewer gas. Properly ventilate the area or wear the proper personal protective equipment. SARS is a viral illness that is a serious form of pneumonia. It was determined in many cases to be transmitted via DWV systems. The meth lab is another problem that is increasing. Meth labs are found in homes, apartments, motels, and other places you may encounter as a plumber or HVAC tech. Even after the chemicals used for cooking meth have been removed, residue can remain. It is oftentimes found in sinks, drains, ventilation systems, and on other surfaces. Even in small amounts, meth lab residue can pose health risk to those exposed. You may experience nausea, breathing problems, headaches, skin, and eye irritations. You may want to contact your local health department or EPA for advice before working in these premises. You may also encounter many environmental hazards in the performance of your job. Asbestos is a known cancer-causing agent. Exposure generally comes from pipe insulation and building materials in remodeling projects. It can also be found in some chemicals and materials. Although we now have stricter state and federal regulations on asbestos abatement, often these are ignored or not enforced in renovation projects. Exposure to asbestos can lead to a variety of lung diseases such as mesothelioma, asbestosis, and other pleural diseases. Asbestos exposure is responsible for most cases of malignant mesothelioma. Common symptoms include progressive shortness of breath, non-productive cough, and chest pain. Dust exposure can cause many of the same diseases and symptoms. It often takes years for these things to surface. In some cases, 20 to 40 years before the symptoms show up. These risks are increased and worsened by smoking. Silica exposure generally occurs when rock and sand are encountered in construction. A variety of conditions have been associated with inhalation of silica, including silicosis, tuberculosis, obstructive lung disease, and lung cancer. Again, smoking makes this situation worse as well. Make sure that when you're working with things like concrete saws and jackhammers that you have the proper protective devices on. Lead. Lead is a cumulative poison. It is toxic to virtually every human organ and can have serious long-term health effects. The main target for lead poisoning is the nervous system. It may also cause weakness in fingers, wrists, and ankles. It can also cause blood pressure issues. In pregnant women, it can cause miscarriage. Lead is used in our industry in flashing, sheet lead for pans, lead joints in soil pipe, and some other plumbing fixtures and fittings. Although we have the new federal lead-free rules that became effective January 2014, there are exceptions allowed to those rules such as non-potable or industrial systems, valves of 2 inches or larger, service saddles, and other exclusions. Lead can enter the body as dust or fumes. Lead paint dust can be encountered in repairs and remodel projects that require the removal of sections of walls or ceilings. It is imperative that if you have been working with lead that you thoroughly wash your hands before eating. Food should not be eaten in areas where there is lead dust. Lead poisoning is especially dangerous to children under the age of 7. High lead levels in children can lead to permanent damage. I'll give you a couple of scenarios too. When I was a child growing up in a plumbing shop, my sister and I, some of our favorite toys were scraps of sheet lead, those type of things. My dad would order large shipments of lead from a supplier in Minnesota. Typically that semi delivering that lead came at night when there was no one else there, and we would help him unload those lead ingots off the truck. And like I said, we always had lead around something that we were doing with. And we always jokingly said, well, that never hurt us. We never had any problem with that. But as we got older and we learned more about lead, we wondered maybe we do. I myself have had elevated blood pressure issues since I was a teenager. My sister has difficulty handling things with her hands, weakness in her fingers and wrists and being able to hold on to things. Now, are those from other things that we've encountered in our life, or are those from our lead exposure as a child? We really don't know. I'm also involved with the lead program in the state of Illinois, the Lead Poisoning Elimination Advisory Board, and we hear a lot of different case studies, and this one was particularly interesting to me and hit home to our trade and our type of workers. Case workers are often sent out when physicians identify high lead levels in children. And typically when they go out, they find older homes in disrepair, older windows with lead paint creating lead dust, and that's generally where the problems come from. They had a case, the caseworker went out, and when she got there, it was a beautiful home in a nice subdivision, none of the typical things. It was a newer home, newer windows, no lead paint. They tested everything in the house. They could not come up with where that child was getting the lead poisoning. And they did more testing and more investigation, and eventually what they found was the father was coming directly from work every night, picking up the child at daycare. He would pick up the child, carry it out, put it in the car seat in the car, and then when he arrived home, did it in the reverse. Took the child out, carried him into the house, and then got cleaned up after work. They finally discovered that this gentleman worked in an environment that had a lot of lead dust, and he had that lead dust on his clothes, and just for that short exposure of him putting the child in and out of the child seat in the car caused that child to have lead poisoning. So that's how easily it can be transported home to our families. So you should always change your clothes before coming home, or wear coveralls that can be left at the job if you've been working with lead. Make sure to remove your shoes or boots before entering their home too, as you can also bring in things that way. The use of PPE such as face masks, gloves, coveralls, and shoe covers should be considered when working with lead. And especially remember to wash your hands before eating, drinking, or smoking. Chemicals in our industry present a variety of issues. Make sure you know what you're using and what the potential hazards are by reviewing the material safety data sheets. Drain cleaners, glues, solvents, and sealants are just a few of the items we deal with on a regular basis. I remember sitting in our shop with the other plumbers at night at the end of the day and peeling the plastic pipe glue off our hands as we sat and discussed the events of the day and planned to work for the next. Now, is that ever going to have an effect on our health, or has it had effect? We don't know, but that's something that may show up in time. But that's another thing that we never should have gotten into that situation using those glues, but we just didn't think that that would hurt us. So those are just some of the chemicals that we're exposed to. Burns can be caused by chemicals, hot water, steam, and tools of the trade. Be cautious when working with boilers, water heaters, near relief valves, and cutting into existing piping. Even severe sunburn can lead to time away from the job and future health issues. Vermin and other critters can present hazards to your health as well. Bacteria, viruses, and diseases can be carried by insects, birds, reptiles, and rodents. Avoid infested areas, use the necessary repellents, and be very aware of your surroundings. If the area you're working in or the area that you live in has poisonous snakes or spiders, make sure you know the proper procedures in case of a bite. Mosquitoes carry things like West Nile and other viruses. Ticks can spread Rocky Mountain spotted fever and Lyme disease. Protect yourself when working on projects outdoors, in crawl spaces, basement, and other areas where these type of hazards may be present. Poison plants like poison ivy, oak, sumac, and others can make your life miserable. You can also take these poisons home via your clothes, boots, and tools. Make sure you wear disposable or cleanable items like rubber boots or protectors. Poison ivy can remain on items like tools and shovels and your shoes for months. Know what is in your area and how to avoid it. Also, there are some preventive things you can do. Linemen are one people that they have a protective ointment that they put on their arms and on their clothing before they go out to work in these areas that are high concentrations of these poisons. Sharps. Sharps are like razor blades, needles, syringes, dental wires, glass, suture needles, scalpel blades, and utility knife blades. Many times these items are not disposed of properly. Use caution when working in places like healthcare facilities, schools, and dental offices. You've already heard how many things can enter your body through cuts and punctures. If you accidentally get a cut or a puncture from these type of sharps, it just gives an easy entryway into your body for the things that we've already discussed. Other areas of concern are also being discovered in studies. Things like aerolization of bacteria or viruses when toilets are flushed and grease interceptors are opened. We have new things we're looking at like Ebola and other new diseases and exposures all the time. Where should you look for these hazards that we've discussed? Things like plumbing and piping chases, basements, crawl spaces, remodel, additions, and tie-ins, flooding areas, flooded basements, outside flooded areas, sewer work, whether it's inside or out, healthcare facilities, schools, public restrooms. Basically, everywhere that there is plumbing and piping, there is the potential to have that happen. What are some of the methods of transmission? Inhalation, hand to mouth, cuts, abrasion, open wounds, punctures, absorption, eyes and mucous membranes, ingestion, and tools. You have to remember we don't know who has what and what you can be getting from whom. We also have to remember that sometimes things on our hands very quickly get into our body through our noses, our eyes, our mouths, whether it's through drinking, eating, smoking, or just a common inadvertent touch. Some things are for sharing, but not hazards. You don't want to share these things with others by bringing them home, and you want to remember always to be especially careful around your children, the elderly, and those with compromised immune systems. You also don't want to share things with your pets, and here are some of the things that you can bring home to them. If you're like me, you don't want to bring anything home that will harm your pets any more than you would your spouse or your children. In fact, I know some plumbers that are probably more concerned about bringing things home to their dog than they are their spouse, but that's another story. Canine parvovirus is carried by dogs and is a virus that is extremely hardy and can live out of body for up to a year. It survives even very cold temperatures, and the only household disinfectant that will kill the virus is bleach. Dogs may be carriers without showing any signs of the illness. Parvo is highly contagious to dogs who have not been vaccinated for it. You can bring it home on your shoes, hands, clothes, or even the tires of your truck. It cannot be transmitted to humans. And I did have an employee one time that had this happen. He'd been on a job site working in a home, not knowing that the dog had parvo, and actually carried it home to his own animals. Earlier we discussed leptospirosis and hepatitis in humans. This also affects animals, and they should be vaccinated for it. Transmission is dog to dog, but you can bring it home on you from exposure from another dog. Internal worms and heartworms are other potential hazards that you can bring home to your pets. Distemper is spread to dogs by aerolization and in cats through fecal matter. Upper respiratory disease in cats is a highly contagious upper respiratory disease that is spread from cat to cat or via you. Ectoparasites, such as fleas and ticks, can also find their way with you and afflict your animals. So how do you protect yourself? By using the proper PPEs and methods, and most of all, the awareness of your situation and the potential hazards. How do you protect your family? By cleaning your shoes, your boots, washing your hands. Make sure that you shower and change clothes either at a shop before you come home or immediately when you get home, and wash those clothes separately from the rest of the family so that you're not spreading what is on them over to their clothing. Do not bring contaminated items home, such as shovels or other tools that maybe you've been using in areas that have poison on them or chemicals. Pay special attention to exposures to young children, pregnant women, and the elderly. They are so vulnerable, and it's so easy for them to contract so many of these things. So in conclusion, and backing up, before we conclude, I want to bring up also the use of PPE. It's available, and it's there for a reason. Don't be the tough guy that says, I don't need safety glasses, I don't need gloves, I don't need that. I worked with a lot of tough guys over the years. Many of those so-called tough guys now are either not with us or they're dealing with injuries and illnesses from not using the equipment that was given them to them. So as employers, make sure that you have your employees protected by making these things available and making sure that they use them. So in conclusion, assess the situation that you're in. Think of all the potential hazards that are out there. Take the proper precautions. And in your work and in your business, be clean, be safe, and be healthy. Thank you for your time today. And if we have any questions now, Wayne, be willing to address those.
You mentioned sewer gas earlier, and someone has a question. What is the higher concentration, which is, I believe it should have been killer for sewer gas? Expound on that for now.
Well, obviously you don't want to put yourself in those situations where it's concentrated levels, but you'll start noticing things like eye irritation, you'll be sick to your stomach, you might have trouble getting your breath, and it's just like, say, for example, even carbon monoxide poisoning. You know, when you start feeling these sensations, you need to get to fresh air. And same way with you've got other employees or a coworker that you're seeing experiencing these problems. Get to fresh air, get out of those situations. But make sure you're not working in an area, say even a confined space of some sort, even if it's just a crawl space or whatever, where there may be a sewer open or you've got a DWV line open or something where that sewer gas is coming in. Just be aware and make sure that you're wearing proper equipment.